Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, I am so glad that you did this post. This is an amazing thing you've done here. And the reason for me is when I first read the Devin Nunes Final Report, and I was glancing over it, and I got to all of these different findings. There are 43 of them. And as I was looking them over, I'm going, what is this? They're making conclusions based on fake intelligence. Well, I guess if they were given fake intelligence, they could only look at that, so they had to make these conclusions. But even with that, they found that there was no collusion. And so it looked like a bowl of noodles to me when I looked at it. And I didn't talk about it much. And then there you were, you hand me this and you say, here, post this. What you've done is you've taken these findings and you've given us a reality check of what's really going on so that we can see through the fake intelligence to see the real truth. So thank you. Now, all of your responses are in the article link below. I'm going to give 4 as an example, and then I know you want to take our listeners a little bit further in the narrative. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, and show the big reveal.
Okay. So just to warm everybody up, I'm going to take finding number 2. Russia supports fringe political parties and non-governmental organizations in Europe to further the Kremlin's agenda while also disparaging or discrediting politicians and groups seen as hostile to Moscow. What's the reality?
Oh, that's a good one to start off with, because in Europe, Russia doesn't get to do anything. Tell me any time that you've ever found anything that came back to the Russians, because they don't let any hate speech happen. There's no free speech whatsoever. And the accusations in France that there was, and Germany, that there was Russian election meddling, complete nonsense, just like it was nonsense here in the U.S. presidential election. So this is just the kind of setup. The first sections of findings were about Russian interference, because that's what they were looking at, just as you said. They were looking at the January 2017 Joint Intelligence Community report on Russian interference or Russian meddling in the election. And so they had a bunch of nonsense graphs that had been created over years showing that Russia Today and Sputnik had some influence upon Americans when most Americans don't know either one of those news agencies even exist. So that's what that is about. But that is nothing compared to what we did in the Russian elections, with meddling in their elections with Putin, with the sanctions we put on them, with the attacks against the oligarchs that support him, and basically with the disinformation we spread throughout any country, both through our own CIA, through democratic organizations and non-governmental organizations and humanitarian organizations. We do all of that. America is the king of doing that.
Okay. Finding number 8. Russian state actors and third-party intermediaries were responsible for the dissemination of documents and communications stolen from U.S. political organizations. Now, I know that you could spend 3 hours answering that, but let's keep it,
Ooh,
all right, go ahead.
I can't believe you chose that
What
one.
is like the reality going on here?
Well, in the notes to that finding, it says that they're blaming Guccifer 2.0, which is a joke, because it's like indicting 13 Russians who don't exist anymore and don't work for the IRA, which doesn't exist anymore, like Mueller did in his special investigation. Indicting people in thin air. It's castles in the air.
We also
nonsense.
talk about Dmitry Alperovich there,
Oh, don't get me started.
He left the Russian footprints of the in the DNC server. There was no hacking of the DNC by Russia. It was a breach from the inside of the DNC, as evidenced by Podesta emails.
At this point, it is nothing more than a rumor of Dmitry Alperovich, because no one has ever examined that server. So it's a complete moot point until that server is examined, and I'm sure it's been cleaned a whole lot better than Hillary's server was cleaned with that bleach. So I doubt they'll find anything there.
Okay, all right. Okay, here's another one. We'll make this one the final one so that you can, because they're all really good, folks. You got to open up the article and see these reality checks that Thomas has for you. Finding number 27. The Republican National Security Establishment's opposition to candidate Trump created opportunities for two less experienced individuals with pro-Russia views to serve as campaign advisors, George Papadopoulos and Carter Page.
Nonsense. Carter Page tried to force himself on the Trump campaign because he was approached by his boss, James Comey, and he was an asset that had been used against the Russians prior to that. And in January of 2016, Carter Page was basically told, go force yourself upon the campaign. He never really got close at all, and in the end, he pestered them so much that they put a restraining order on him so that he couldn't come near the campaign. So how could he have been the recipient of literally, we estimated between $5 to $6 billion in payoffs that he was supposed to get for connecting Trump to Putin oligarchs working through Alpha Bank. All complete and absolute total nonsense. He didn't even get near the campaign. He couldn't have done any of those things, and that was the basis for the Carter Page dossier, Russian dossier, FISA 702 Title I request that said that Carter Page was an absolute spy, 100%. And when we see those documents, which has been asked for again and again by Congress in an unredacted form, we'll see Comey's real crimes, because we'll see the lies he had to make up to get that. In October of 2016, he was able to get finally that FISA court warrant that he wanted, which then continued on after the election. And these are the things we always want to point out. The things that are pointed out here, don't take it even as far as the Nunes memo that shows the true corruption that was going on when he started to blend the content of the Page-struck text messages, the very partisan and very weaponized political machine of the DOJ, FBI. Now it's got a new name from the new text. Every time you see a text message, which I always call sex texts, from Strzok and Page, it's renaming their Trump organization, the Trump group, the Trump impeachment group, the secret society. They come up with a new name for it every single time. So we now we're promised from the Department of Justice and from the FBI, we were promised 10,000 text messages. We get 232, and they're completely redacted. Then we're promised the rest of the 55,000, and we get 49.
Well, that's because they had to take off all of the senior executive service employees. They're all redacted. So there you go.
That is what Louis Boyd said in his letter from the DOJ to the Congress. Sorry, I'm removing all attachments to these text messages. I'm removing all personal remarks, even though these are on government accounts. I'm removing all SES member names and anyone else's name that needs to be redacted for this sake of security.
We need to unredact it, and then we'll know where the problem children are.
Well, that's the whole point in this new report, this Russian Active Measures report, as it's called, the one that was released earlier in March, but only got cleaned up and ready to be released to the public last Friday. And so we wrote our response to the 44 findings, and you can go through it, and it's so redacted you can't figure out a lot of what is being said. But from what is being said, it's pretty damnable, because it supports so much of what was said in the Nunes memo, and it shows that Trump, and this is the great news, and I want to frame this, that Trump is not in any way connected in any conspiracy, any collusion, or any cooperation with the Trump team with Russians. So again, he's exonerated, but let's remember Rod Rosenstein came out and exonerated him again as evidence from the Mueller special counsel investigation.
Well, what is Mueller going to do? I mean, if this report shows nothing, what is he going to show?
He's like a hound dog, that Mueller, chasing some squirrels up a tree.
I think he's chasing his own tail.
Michael Flynn's going to be able to get out of those charges if he's got a clever lawyer. Manafort and Gates should be able to get out of theirs. Carter Page, of course, dropped his suit against Yahoo News. So really, what does that come to? George Papadopoulos, I don't think, has ever been indicted or in any way charged. He wasn't even questioned until a year after John Brennan's insinuation that George Papadopoulos, talking with Alexander Weiner in London about the missing 33,000 Hillary emails and that the Russians might have them and that he'd be interested in getting those for the Trump campaign. He had almost nothing to do with the Trump campaign. His name was on one document. He went to one meeting. He never spoke to Trump. Carter Page never spoke to Trump. He never even went to a meeting. So these two people that are named in these two different approaches to get surveillance put on Trump's team, well, Manafort already had surveillance for quite some time. He was under 4 investigations before he came to the Trump team. Michael Flynn was no doubt under investigation and had a FISA warrant on him, but for international concerns because of his association with President Erdogan of Turkey and his very strong support of not sending troops into Syria, which got him fired from the Obama administration. So what you see in that one particular accusation that these two people, that's somehow Trump's responsibility and a lack of security or a lack of understanding. No, this was a setup by Comey on both instances and with the support of John Brennan with George Papadopoulos. And really what it comes down to, and what the reason that Devin Nunes said that when he looked into all of this, and then he looked at John Brennan's testimony before his own committee, that he said there was no intelligence that started the George Papadopoulos counterintelligence activity that then went to the FBI counterintelligence department headed by William Presap and coordinated by Andrew McCabe and James Comey.
No, it was just an outright coup d'etat. I mean, you can code it any way you want, and you can break it down all you want, but Betsy always said it's a coup d'etat.
And the dossier, GPS, Fusion GPS was paid supposedly as much as $12 million from Perkins Coie by John Podesta and Hillary Clinton's victory campaign. Only now is the Federal Elections Commission looking into the fact that $84 million was shuffled around and given to Hillary illegally, and that she used $12 million of that to pay a lawyer firm to act like she wasn't buying Russian-generated, through Christopher Steele, a British ex-secret agent, which all foreign agents, as well as others we can name, but the point is that they spent $12 million through Fusion GPS to create an opposition research fake Russian dossier, which she also then got her friend Sidney Blumenthal to get her other friend to write a salacious document that was added to it. Comey added to it. Bill Orr added to it. His wife, Nellie Orr, added to it. Glenn Simpson added to it. Everyone piled on and added to that Russian dossier. And then Comey and Boente and Rosenstein and others all signed off on it 4 times to say and to swear that it was all true when they knew it was unverified, salacious, and they actually created it.
Yes, but Thomas, think about that big picture you just painted. Plus, we know that there was election rigging that was going on with Google and Eric Schmidt and Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, and that was happening with the U.S. Digital Service right there in the White House with Obama. Plus, you had these, what did they call it, man in the middle issues at the state level with the rigging, and you had an amazing, the media is all behind Hillary, right? All we patriots had was a little microphone in our house and a little YouTube channel, right? So the power of the people was amazing. We crushed her. We just crushed her with all that, people. We are more powerful than they are, and we will always be more powerful.
The Fourth Estate is crushing the elite and the government deep state and the corporatism that is trying to take over America. And so I'm going to give the big reveal now before I forget it.
Okay.
No, I can't forget it because it's so big. Back in February, I was yelling about this. Now, I don't yell anymore, as you know. I've changed my personality, and some say I've changed my name. And all kinds of other things.
Now, wait a minute. Now, the name thing, we have to say, we have something called the glass bead game, and we have different persona for each of the different areas and zones of the game. So when you call us by a certain name, we know what level of the game you're playing on. So it's not a big mystery, but we're not going to tell you. That takes the fun of the game away. So go ahead, big reveal.
The big reveal is that back in February, Grassley's Judiciary Committee put out a list that we talked about a lot. We went down everyone on the list and tried to name who they were and what their corruption was, because it was the list of what was going to be happening. And on that list was Daniel Jones, Adam Waldman, and my favorite, Oleg Deripaska, the great aluminum oligarch from Russia who's a personal friend of Putin's, who gave money to a D.C. lawyer who represents him as a foreign representative, a foreign agent, an agent of a foreign country. And that's what Oleg Deripaska is. He gave millions, along with George Soros and 7 to 10 other people, to another company like Fusion GPS. It's called PENN, P-E-N-N, Quarter Group. And it's ran by Daniel Jones. $50 million to continue the research that Christopher Steele was making up and gathering from all those sources I just mentioned, as well as from Alexandra Chalupa and in Ukraine and everybody else they could gather up any dirt on him. Oh my, we didn't know this. After Christopher Steele blew it because he revealed to the press and gave out copies under the direct orders of Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson and his group of corrupt people, including Nellie Orr, who helped, of course, write probably good parts of the Russian dossier. I almost forgot to mention that. And everyone added to it. And so Christopher Steele was the person who then brought it back into America, took it to all these different mainstream media groups, which they all committed crimes by receiving this. And then by an accident, they allowed a copy to get out. And then when the copy got out, lying machine James Clapper then said, we got to do something. Now, I'm adding this. Sorry. I'm going out into the weeds, but I have to add this. John Brennan was the person who said, take the dossier information, take the 2 pages. Interesting, there was only 1 page given to Trump. But take the 2 pages, which was a summary, executive summary of the 36-page Russian dossier, and just put it on the daily presidential intelligence update so that everyone who has now been allowed to look at that, because Obama passed rules in his last moments of being in his administration to allow all NSA collection raw data to be allowed to all 17 intelligence community agencies. So he leaked it. John Brennan leaked it. He didn't leak it. It was now legal. He allowed everyone to know this. So then when they coordinated to have Comey go and give Trump a bogus lie of an executive review of what was in this dossier, a complete lie, and then Comey refused to do his duty, which was to prove it or not prove it. Trump asked him again and again, can't you verify this? It didn't happen. And Comey did nothing. Why? He created it. It was an attempted coup d'etat looking right in his face. And Clapper was there lying, Brennan was there lying, and they all released it and then leaked it. And now Clapper admits he leaked it to CNN. He has to go to jail for that.
Yeah, well,
if Andrew McCabe goes to jail, Comey goes to jail, Brennan goes to jail, Clapper goes to jail.
Okay, and this is where you get really soft, and I just have to say no. This was an attempted overthrow of the U.S. government. We need the full weight and measure of the law now to come into place, and if enough citizens get this clear picture of what has happened, these people need to be arrested for treason.
Bruce Orr, what do I keep calling him? Bill Orr? Bruce Orr. Isn't his name Bruce? Bruce Orr was the DOJ, the Department of Justice representative. Remember, who was he representing? Loretta Lynch and later John Kerry, and for a while Sally Yates. Through the Department of Justice, he was also coordinating the Department of State and coordinating the FBI. So when Glenn Simpson was meeting with Christopher Steele, it was in complete cognizance of Bruce Orr, whose wife Nellie Orr had provided part of the fake Russian dossier. So Steele made some big mistakes. One of them was writing a letter to support the reality of the dossier's existence, and he gave it to Yahoo News, but he was the byline. He was the guy who wrote it. And that's why Carter Page was going to sue him, because Carter Page says that was defamation of character. You can't defame anyone worse than Carter Page has already been defamed for all of his crimes, just like Felix Sater and the rest of the people that Comey worked with. Sergei Milian, who was also mentioned in the dossier, who's now disappeared. So what we're talking about here, and I didn't finish because I went off into the weeds, had to. Here's what happened. After Christopher Steele couldn't carry through, Daniel Jones picked up the ball. And for $50 million, not $12 million.
Now, this is Dianne Feinstein's staffer.
Correct.
Dianne Feinstein, who back in 1979 tried to get the city of San Francisco to adopt a senior executive service program. I'm just saying.
Right. She tried to take a federal above civil service program into her own city so that she could then have ultimate control of anyone she appointed
So,
there.
I mean, when I put those dots together, that Daniel Jones is Feinstein's staffer. Feinstein, we know her backstory is like, oh my gosh, she's like the queen of corruption.
Let me reiterate
All right,
this.
go for it.
Adam Waldman, the D.C. lawyer who represents a foreign agent who's a Russian foreign agent who is a friend of Putin's, Oleg Deripaska, the great aluminum oligarch of Russia, gave money to another oppositional research company, along with George Soros and 7 to 10 other donors. This is the note that is in the new release of Nunes, what we're calling Nunes' Final Report. So here we have the smoking gun for Russian interference in the election, down to a T. Here it is in the report, folks. You wanted Russian collusion? We got Russian collusion, not only with the $12 million spent through Fusion GPS to create the fake Russian dossier, but they worked with Russians, remember, and they worked with Brits. That's all illegal. And then they leaked it. Every leak was illegal. And they worked with a politicized, weaponized DOJ, FBI, CIA, NSA. This is the greatest political crime in U.S. history. And when this coup d'etat is completely ferreted out in the next few years as the crimes come to the surface and each of the rats turns on each other and they start to become cannibals. They were parasites before, but now they're becoming cannibals of their own kind. It's a beautiful thing for us to sit back and watch, and as we reveal it again and again, Daniel Jones, you're going down. What you did is a massive crime. You accepted money from the Russians to create a furtherance of a fake dossier to try to rig an election so that you could, in fact, impeach a sitting president. And your research was then, of course, I'm going to speculate, but it's not really speculation. Like, we mentioned everything that was going to be.
But was he ordered by Dianne Feinstein to do this?
Don't know.
I know that's a question. I mean, he is her staffer.
Well, think of this. George Soros donated. Who else did George Soros donate to? The Democratic National Committee.
Well, she used to be on the Gang of Eight, and she got right off after the 2016 elections.
She got off after she took the behind closed doors testimony of Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS and made it public.
Oh, that's right.
So that he could get out in front of the narrative and give his own exoneration speech and his own alibi, just like Donna Brazil did and just like Weiner did in the Department of Justice, and just like on and on and on. These people are jumping ship, and when they jump ship, they tell their story. Why are they jumping ship? Then the Inspector General can't question them because they don't work for the government anymore. But don't count on Michael Horowitz. We make fun of him and his work in our responses to the 44 findings of this Russian active measures. Russian active measures. There were no Russian active measures. The IRA that Mueller says existed didn't exist when he said it existed. There is no evidence to any of that. The very things Facebook say were put out on Facebook were put out by the Global Engagement Center. That was stated by the people who quit the Global Engagement Center and then openly made fun of the fact that they did these things. So we've already revealed all this. We revealed what was going to come up. Not only the Nunes memo, we predicted that, but we also predicted everything in there except this point. And it is the big reveal. This is the most important thing so far of the congressional investigations. Remember, congressional investigation, they happen during election time so that you can muddy your opponent's pond so you can win. It doesn't usually go to investigations. Grassley demanding an investigation of Christopher Steele. What's happening? Crickets.
Oh, that's
Jeff Sessions doing nothing.
Yeah.
You know, these demands on the 27 leaks. They know there were 27 separate leaks What does Sessions do? Oh, we're giving that to Michael Horowitz. We're throwing it on his plate since he's not busy looking into the politicization of the DOJ and FBI, which is so thick that he had to look at 55,000 sex texts, which have not yet been revealed, and no one was fired. So that means he found no crimes.
What is the big reveal? Did I miss it?
The big reveal is $50 million from a Russian was paid through a person who already testified to this, his lawyer, Adam Waldman, and it was paid to oppositional research to continue the Steele dossier and to make up lies and to continue what we now know is the Mueller investigation. So if you want to know where any of these facts are coming from that Mueller is discovering, that would be the $50 million spent to continue the Christopher Steele fake Russian dossier. But now it's turned to, can we get Manafort? So they made up a $27 million fake ledger in Ukraine for Manafort. We pointed out who made that up, Alexa Chalupa. She was on the Democratic National Committee, and it was a very bad idea on her part. And it was popped and busted immediately. And then, of course, the three oligarchs and the offshore accounts and the mortgage nonsense, that was already known by the investigations of Manafort and Gates long before they came to Trump. So, what we see here in this release is a politicized statement that Trump is innocent and enough water to put out the Mueller special investigation fire. That's what it really is. And we have to applaud Devin Nunes. And I want to say, in my personal opinion, Douglas Gabriel's personal opinion, Devin Nunes should become the new Attorney General.
Support!
And don't worry, Jeff Sessions won't notice because he's see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. He's Mr. Magoo. He is Rip Van Winkle. He is not awake. He doesn't even know where his office is, and the phone hasn't been installed yet.